All right, episode 2 of Bruise News. And for those watching on video, you see a very familiar face if you follow We're Live, pal. We did not get to record this week, so I was like, hey, I have to get Andrew on Bruise News because I miss talking to this guy. What's up, Andrew?
Dude, I regret not being able to do it. I still don't feel 100%, man.
you
That's why I didn't have Rich in the studio today when we did Matman. I'm just like, I came down with like the stomach bug, and it's still kicking the crap out of me.
Well, it's because you work a lot. You're gonna have to take some time. Rest up a
Yeah.
little bit.
Well, nonstop. I'm like Vince. I'm watching him right now while we're doing the show right now. I'm like, first of all, he's wearing the same outfit I'm wearing to work today.
Oh, there you go.
Got the tightest jeans on, got the blazer. I put mine away. I'm like, all right, not bad. If I look like that guy in my 70s, I did well.
Okay, but do you have the same shoes here?
No, but do you
The
want to see my shoes? I'll
Yeah,
show
show 'em.
you. I got alligator red bottoms.
See, like, that's what I expected Vince to wear, and he wore some, like, Asics sneakers with his
I got
suit
I
on
know.
Pat
I
McAfee
know.
show.
I got alligator red bottoms on.
All right, so, we'll get to the Vince McAfee thing. Unfortunately, I thought it was gonna be over by the time we recorded, so I thought we were gonna actually have some news. There is one piece of news that came out of that show, but, we'll get to that in a second because the thing that I wanted to bring you on about was to talk about this Tony Khan deal yesterday on Dynamite. He acquired Ring of Honor, and I just wanted to read the top of this quote. Ring of Honor's influence on modern professional wrestling is etched permanently in the history books, and this acquisition ensures that its legacy will be kept alive and treated with the utmost respect. Obviously, there's a library, ROH library thing to this. But what did you think of that announcement when you saw it go live?
So it's interesting because a lot of the elements, I think we spoke about this yesterday. I was going back and forth with you because I got a couple messages from people saying, he's definitely acquired an international pro wrestling promotions catalog or
Yeah.
library. I can't remember what it was, and I'm like, that's an interesting way of wording it. Um, the first time I heard it was from a non wrestling person. The second time I heard it, it was a lot of people within WWE saying the same thing. So I envisioned he had just acquired the library, but Ring of Honor still plays in the mix. Ring of Honor is an international promotion, technically. And
Yeah.
I didn't really understand what they meant by international. WWE assumed it was a Japanese promotion that was not New Japan. So your options are really limited. I mean, you got
Well,
All Japan,
All
and then
Japan was kind of, I think people were kind of tweeting about that yesterday.
yeah,
Was All Japan, and you and I had the discussion. We were going over every possible
yeah.
company that was there. But so let's go back to this quote because I think there's a piece of it here where he says. This deal adds thousands of hours of content to a rapidly growing library and creates new opportunities to expand our footprint on a national and global scale. So
Yeah.
that is probably where that comes from. So you made a tweet yesterday where you heard that streaming was going to be the deal. Now, based off of what the ROH brand is, part of that is the library. It would assume that they are creating this back catalog to then sell that to a streaming service. Do you still feel confident that that is sort of the next thing on the table for them?
Yeah, I do. It's been on the table for them for a long time, and this is something they've been attempting to do for quite some time. They having a streaming partner to catalog your archives, to display your library of content is an important part, especially in sports. I think, and especially with pro wrestling, we saw with WWE what they did with the network. It was revolutionary for a lot of people. It brought back a ton of disenfranchised viewers. I could tell you a lot of my buddies came back. There were a couple moments that they came back. Obviously, AEW is one of those, right? A
Yeah.
lot of people came back for AEW. The Bullet Club boom was another one. I'm saying in recent times, right? The Bullet Club boom brought back a lot of disenfranchised fans because it was reminiscent of the wrestling that they followed. Uh, and I definitely think the network was one of those. A lot of my buddies that hadn't mentioned a word about pro wrestling, you know what? They signed up and they started watching all the Monday Night War stuff.
All the
I
stuff
mean,
from when they were kids.
all the stuff when they were a kid. And I
Yeah.
think there is a market for having your content on there. Obviously, AEW is only 2.5 years old, and they only have a handful of pay-per-views that they can put on. But you get a Ring of Honor that has 20 years of archives to kind of piggyback on that, and maybe you do get, not saying DDT, but maybe DDT or Joshi Pro or something on there that gives you access to something else. You now have created I mean, you evaluated your company's value tremendously. You evaluate. I can't think. Sorry. You've taken your company's value
Mm-hmm.
for evaluation, and you've brought it up tremendously because you have assets now, more assets than you had, yesterday. So I think this is an approach for them, but I definitely think having that streaming provider, hopefully it's HBO Max. That's the rumblings. It'll be a great platform for them.
Okay, here's the piece of that news that didn't make much sense to me, which is the ROH brand, keeping the ROH brand alive. I have, and Dave and Brian talked about this on Wrestling Observer Radio. I cannot fathom why you would run an ROH branded show when AEW is the hottest upstart pro wrestling brand in the last, I don't know how many years, right? Like, they are the hot thing. Those 3 letters are hot. So why would you even think of running anything with the ROH name?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We could say the same argument for ECW and what WWE did. Why would you dedicate an hour of programming for a brand that you don't have? It doesn't have the recognition that you do. I don't. I'm not crazy about running another promotion for AEW. I already think, and I've said this before, and people think I'm crazy. I think Rampage was a detriment to Dynamite. Not, it wasn't a companion that elevated them. I think it was a detriment because you've now taken talent that you're putting front and center in front of 1.1 million people, and you're taking that talent out and you're putting it in front of 500,000 people. I get why they did it. We all know, they want a third hour, but here's a theory. You take that Dark Elevation show, you rebrand it Ring of Honor, and you make it into your developmental program. And now there is something to combat NXT. Now you have an answer for NXT where you have your own developmental program. You stick to the Code of Honor stuff. You occasionally bring in the Ring of Honor guys, originals over there, and now you have an incubator with a name that has a better name than Dark Elevation.
So the thing that makes sense to me is if they did a version of Ring of Honor on their streaming, whatever the streaming thing is, right?
Yeah.
You continue that name, you establish that name, and you can kind of run it as 2 separate entities. The problem with that, though, is when you want to sell tickets to it, it's got to be AEW presents Ring of Honor, right?
Yeah. And when you do that, Garrett, when you do that in the Hammerstein.
Well, there you go.
You do that at the Hammerstein that you run, you can run a once a year show there that you highlight all your developmental talent, and you have some of these Ring of Honor originals that could show. I feel like I've gone back like to 2005 talking about the originals, like the ECW originals. I don't have enough time already with wrestling.
Yeah.
I don't know what a AEW presents Ring of Honor product would look like weekly, but does it have to be that? I mean, I think Dave was mentioning, developmental on Wrestling Observer Live, and that is something that's missing for AEW. They don't have a developmental program. I know that they're doing a lot with Dark Elevation and Dark, and where they have a lot of the guys that aren't on TV. But do you need to sell tickets? It can be a studio show. And that kind of takes that touring out of the window where you don't have to worry about touring. You're in a. By the way, Pat McAfee is losing his mind. I don't know what's happening on the screen. I could just see him jumping up and down.
So our friend Daza here says Vince is offering Pat a match at Mania. So we'll I don't know much other than that, but
I don't either.
thanks to Daza for sending it. So here's a question,
Yeah.
and this comes from somebody who's watching. From Andy Bowen, he says, I think TK watches the ROH Weekly show. He signed Jay Lethal after a best of show and then buys ROH after Danielson, Samoa Joe, and Punk Hall of Fame episodes. So here's what I was wondering is that if you're Tony Khan, were you a giant Ring of Honor fan? It sounds like he was. And B, if you are somebody who thinks about wrestling in the prestige of history, right? How do we want to make wrestling better for the history? WWE has gone this way with it. And like, it's funny because Pat asked Vince about why he calls it sports entertainment instead of wrestling. And Vince said to distinguish ourselves, like we want it to be different. But if you are looking at this and saying, how do we continue the history and the archive of wrestling, having the ROH brand go dead and not exist any longer and be bought by WWE to just literally become the library, I could see Tony doing that. And he's got the money. He's a very wealthy person, comes from a tremendously wealthy family, and at some point he probably in the back of his mind has this idea that, if we ever decide to do some sort of invasion angle, I can do it better, and on all those things. But do you think that a lot of this comes from his fandom and his fandom of actual wrestling?
Yeah, 100%. Listen, he's I don't know Tony. I know that you've spoken to Tony.
Mm-hmm.
Dave knows Tony, and people that know him know that he is a pro wrestling fan. He's a historian. His knowledge of the business is more than people that have spent 30, 40 years in the business. He's an unbelievably smart guy. It could be just for himself, and that's amazing that he could do that. But he's also a business guy, and he's not doing this as a vanity project or anything like that. He really wants to improve the industry. And I'm not, and I use this on Matman today. WWE, they have become in terms of pro wrestling history, they have become the Library of Alexandria, right? They're in possession of nearly all the promotions at this point. Anything that's worth watching, they have access to that. I don't like having them tell the story of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Having one person possessing or one company possessing an entire industry, no, it's not my thing. Listen, I'm all for competition. I think that people should be able to watch whatever they want. But
Sure.
I think in Ring of Honor's case, if WWE did get that archive, they would have just slapped it on there half-assed more than anything else, because we've seen what they did with WCCW. We saw a lot of tapes are missing from Mid-South. A lot of those stuff is like in pieces.
Yeah.
AWA, a lot of that stuff is in pieces and still not accessible. So I when you look at it in that sense, I think Tony will do the best for preserving the image of Ring of Honor for what it was, and also honoring these guys. They have a Hall of Fame now. All those guys going in the Hall of Fame are, they're AEW or AEW bound guys. You could keep the Hall of Fame, call it the Honor Club or whatever you want. They already have the rings,
Yeah.
It feels very the synergy between these two companies and Tony works. I'm hoping that the streaming service is the big focus now.
Yeah.
On where do you put this? I don't think Honor Club's the answer. I don't think anybody says that Honor Club's the answer, and I also don't think they need to build out their own platform. The growth for business to be in front of 45 to 50 million people that HBO has with HBO Max total, HBO Max total, is something that you don't really get an opportunity for, especially for a Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor will be in front of more people than they've ever been in front of.
Yeah.
With one move, with one
Yeah.
archive move. When you're trying to sell, your developmental program and maybe call it Ring of Honor, and you're trying to sell a yearly special or twice a year special, what better place to market your product than in front of 50 million people rather than being behind, nothing.
And yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. It's well, this is fun because it'll be an ongoing story, and
Tons of fun.
HBO Max is going to probably add a whole lot of subscribers this weekend because the Los Angeles Lakers not even a docuseries, just a series, Winning Time, comes out this weekend. So there's gonna be.
I'm
I
looking.
think they're gonna have a lot more.
I'm looking forward to an AEW and Euphoria crossover.
Oh, there we go.
You know, but one other thing that people are not thinking about is the merchandising opportunities here, right? We're talking about, we're not in the DVD business, and I think Dave had mentioned, like, they don't have the opportunities that WWE did with when they bought, the WCW archives and the ECW stuff, because they were able to pump out these Blu-rays and DVDs. Now we're all streaming and everything is on a service, but we're forgetting the licensing, right?
Yeah.
The toys. You could do a whole Ring of Honor collection for, CM Punk, a Danielson, all these guys.
Yeah.
And now you have assets again, more assets than before. So I think the merchandising opportunities are going to be tremendous for them. They're going to be able to make some really good money. They've solidified a little bit better as being, the pro wrestling company in the business and not sports entertainment. And I don't think this is the only footage that he's going to use. I think he's going to go after some other companies and build a library.
Yeah. That's going to be good. Like we said, for the wrestling industry. Andrew, you've stayed on much longer than
I'm so
I
sorry.
asked for.
I took up too much time.
No. This is to the benefit of the show. I'm appreciative. And what's on Wrestling Observer Live this weekend?
Oh, I got to figure out who my guest is. I'm trying to get Brian on. I have to reach out. You just reminded me. Thanks, Gary. You always remind me on bookings. But we're gonna have Brian on, hopefully, and then we're gonna do hour one. We're doing 2 hours this week for Wrestling Observer Live. Hour two is going to be a Matman takeover with Rich and I running down the AEW Revolution pay-per-view, and then on the F4W YouTube account, the Wrestling Observer YouTube account, we're going to be doing our watch along, which I'm sure you'll call in.
Yeah. I'll try. I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be a full house at Dave's this weekend, I think, to watch.
What kind of charcuterie board does Dave Meltzer serve? That's the question everybody has.
I don't know, man. Only thing I see when I go into the kitchen is just a bunch of Pro Wrestling Torch newsletters. All right. So thanks for hanging out, and we'll be back as well next week with We're Live, pal. All right. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right. Now we're going to bring on two of my favorite people here, Oliver Copp and Paul Fontaine. So we're going to talk about AEW Revolution. Oliver and I have done a bunch of AEW previews before the pay-per-view. So we won't do the full show, but we'll do a lot of that here. Paul hosts the Dynamite show on the Fight Game Media Patreon. And the one thing I wanted to say before this, though, as it's so weird, this Vince McMahon, Pat McAfee interview is still ongoing. Vince did say that he is going to induct The Undertaker into the Hall of Fame. So he believes that he is a draw and that people will hopefully buy tickets. I thought, this is Oliver's idea. The reason I'm bringing this up is because this was Oliver's idea, which was to kind of have a little bit of a roast of The Undertaker you had mentioned. And then I also thought, if you didn't do that, maybe you have all of his greatest foes all kind of induct him at the same time. And it just becomes this Undertaker award, Undertaker Hall of Fame night. And then Paul had an idea of wishing that they had some footage of Paul Bearer that and like all of these things together. No, we just get Vince. Oliver, what do you think about Vince being the inductor?
I would not have thought it was ever going to happen, because Vince has been adamant not to be at the Hall of Fame, never to be inducted, never to be a presenter, never to be associated with it. He always stayed backstage, so this is a big surprise, but I think it's the right call. Because it doesn't get any more special than The Undertaker at WrestleMania.
And I think that they had mentioned the only time that he's ever inducted someone was Austin. I was at that Hall of Fame ceremony, and I was deeply disappointed because they made everyone wrap up in like 10 minutes. Like you had, I think, Terry Funk and Dory Funk there, and they're getting the wrap-up sign, and it's just like, man, so they won't do that this time. I'm sure Vince will have as much time as he wants to tell Undertaker stories. But Paul, just before we move on to AEW, throw out your Paul Bearer idea.
Well, it was, I essentially was thinking that maybe they, obviously they knew a long time ago that they were going to be inducting Undertaker into the Hall of Fame. So I thought, record something with Paul Bearer, just in case. or splice together footage from like DVDs and stuff that they've done, and have Paul Bearer, or the hologram of Paul Bearer, or whatever you want to call it, induct the Undertaker. I just thought that would have been a kind of a special idea, and in this day and age, you can do it. I mean, they're doing concerts right now with holograms that people are paying to go watch, so you could certainly have Paul Bearer induct the Undertaker into the Hall of Fame.
Bruce Pritchard does a great Paul Bearer, by the way.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so Oliver, we've been doing these AEW previews, and I think the last time, or it's maybe been a couple times, I always kind of come in and go, okay, what are you feeling? Like, what is your anticipation for the show? I mean, All Out was one of the I'm trying to think if it was the best wrestling pay-per-view I've ever seen. US, we'll keep it at US. It's definitely the best wrestling show I ever attended live, and I've attended some pretty big shows, some pretty big WrestleManias. But when it comes to Revolution, what is the, like, if you were to rate it on a 1 to 10 on how interested you are coming into this show this weekend, how would you rate it?
Now, if it were a 2-match show, but with CM Punk against MJF and Kingston against Jericho, I'd say a 10 out of 10. So that's where I'm going to be. Like, I'm going to be anticipating the heck out of this.
You know what, though? But by you saying that, I had this discussion in our Facebook group today. Adam Page and Adam Cole, that match is being very much... I guess it's in a sense it's a little underwhelming because you mentioned 2 matches and you didn't mention the men's title match. I kind of wonder what is when the belt, it's going to be the main event. Tony Khan's already said it's going to be the main event. Is it on the wrong person? Because we've had this discussion before. Like there is a romanticism to Adam Page's overall run, being there from the beginning and sort of coming together at the end with beating Kenny Omega at the November show. He's being overshadowed though, and I'm not exactly sure I have the right reason. I have a couple of thoughts. I mean, you just have some giant stars who are in bigger matches, more interesting matches, but knowing wrestling the way that you know it, and Paul, I want to get your thoughts right after. Like, why is Adam Page's title run a little overshadowed here?
I guess because it might be lacking focus. He's not in the program enough, in my opinion. He doesn't look strong enough. I mean, in his matches, he looks great, but leading up to the matches, sometimes he kind of gets into the same situation over and over where somebody else kicks his ass. And it makes him look weak, but he recuperates and he kind of comes back the next week and wins. I mean, he outlasted Bryan Danielson. He beat Lance Archer at his own game, the Texas Death Match. Now he's got a guy who's faster than he is, which is a new situation for him. So maybe they're just checking off all the boxes with him in order to build a title reign that people are going to remember, not necessarily because there was this one flashy moment, but because he defended against a vastly different array of people. But
Paul, do you have any thoughts on why Page might be?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's a lot of what Oliver said. I also think that, I mean, he just doesn't have the charisma and the star power of some of these other guys that are being focused on. Oliver mentioned 2 matches. He didn't even mention Moxley and Danielson, which I think would be a lot of people.
And that's favorite. Mine. That along with Punk and MJF.
Not to mention, you've also got the rematch of Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, who had like the match of the year. So we're talking about the world title match possibly being no higher than the 4th most anticipated singles match on the card, and maybe the 5th. Then you've also got that Face of the Revolution ladder match. You've got the 3-way tag team match, which is going to steal the show. I mean, it may be the 7th biggest match on the show. And it's the
what
world
did
title
you just
match.
say was going to steal the show?
The 3-way tag team title.
Hook.
That's on the pre-show.
Oh, got it. For some, when you said that, what went to my head was the trios match that they said.
That's I mean, that's probably gonna be really good too. But
no,
I mean
Sting, the Sting match. I was like, you mean the Sting match where?
No.
Sting's
No, but that's what I mean. There's so much.
Excitement did not get above a 1 in his promo last night.
Well, I buried that on the Dynamite show, but and Darby, like I don't know what he was doing, but yeah, but no, I mean that. So I mean, it's what the 6th, 7th biggest match on the show, so that's part of it. And then he just doesn't have that overall personality. But I mean, he definitely has it in the ring. I mean, in ring, this might be one of the classic world title reigns of all time by the time we're done. This Cole match will probably be like another 5-star match, according to Dave anyways. And even Adam Cole, like, I just think that he hasn't really been lighting the world on fire. He's in these segments with the Elite and the Red Dragon, and he's like the 5th guy in the group, and he just kind of blends into the background. He does not come off like a world title. Whereas like in NXT, he was like the big dog.
He's the guy.
He was the guy for like 4 years. And here he's just another like little dude on the show.
So Oliver, let's talk about one of the matches that you said you were looking most forward to, CM Punk and MJF. What have you thought about this storyline so far, specifically focusing on the last 2 weeks where they really, really dialed it up with their segments?
It's been a masterclass, in my opinion. I didn't have the highest opinion of MJF for the longest time, but he's made me a believer, 100%. And I loved the genius of going back to something that happened several years ago. And every one of us was thinking, this is bullshit.
Yes.
And then he produced the Facebook post he referenced. That was genius. One of the best long burn wrestling angles that we didn't even know about 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, coming to fruition now. It's perfect.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Okay. So, but answer this question for me, because I think both performances have been great. The one issue I have, and I talked about this with John LaRocca the last couple of nights, last couple shows on the Fight Game podcast, is I don't understand Punk's gullibility in this. So so MJF, he's been a heel and a chicken bleep heel for the entire time, right? So he's a liar, he's a cheater. That's who he is. If that is who he is, and then he comes to Punk, isn't Punk's initial instinct, well, this guy's just a chicken bleep heel. Like, why would I believe him? So last week, not this week, last week, when he did the thing, when he came into the ring, I was like, I don't know if I buy it, because I, as a wrestling fan who is not just watching to watch, I'm looking for holes. Not everyone watches this way, obviously, and I was like, I can't buy it, because I don't think he's being truthful. I think he is trying to set Punk up, and he is trying to set me up as a fan. And so fast forward, last night, the gullibility is there again for Punk, and then he pays for it. And I'm saying, see, this is why I never believed him in the first place. But CM Punk, the babyface, believed him, got beat up, sets up the match. I again, loved the performances. I'm having an issue with that one little thing that I couldn't get over, though.
Okay, I have a theory there.
Okay.
So, CM Punk used to be a cynical bastard. Ever since he came to AEW, he's been trying to turn over a new page.
Happy Punk.
Happy Punk. He's going to get burned over and over until he reaches his breaking point.
That's an interesting theory.
You're going to get the real CM Punk.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Paul?
I think Oliver hit it. And the other thing is, and I don't know how many people picked up on this. I mentioned it on the show last night. It was tweeted out. The promo that he cut on CM Punk when after he bloodied him up and was hanging him up from the dog collar, it was exact word for word promo that CM Punk cut on Raven in ROH. And so he is basically being CM Punk to CM Punk. And the whole promo last week, like, I took it as a villain origin story. So in the villain's mind, he believes everything he's saying, and he says, you made me the way I am right now. So you have sympathy for the villain. It's like the Joker in Batman. It's like Lex Luthor in Superman. But along the way, he got warped. And so even though everything he's saying is true, not every normal person wouldn't react the way MJF reacted, but he twisted it, and now he blames Punk for everything that's wrong with him. And so it's beautiful. And Punk even saw it coming, and he said it, hurt people. He said, I feel like I'm being gaslit. So he's not an idiot. He saw this coming, but MJF still sucked him in because he just, at his core of core, he couldn't believe that he thought there was some decency in MJF, and there isn't. So I mean, and that's like what Oliver said. I mean, I've been saying this like from like week 4. Like, Punk is just way too happy. At some point, he's going to snap, and we're going to see it. And this feud with MJF might bring him there. So I'm all on board. Like, I just think this last 2 weeks has been, we don't deserve it. Like, it's been so good.
All right, Oliver, I don't know what you know. I don't know what you don't know. But if you were in charge of putting together the finish to this match, how would you go about doing it?
That's a tough one because MJF already went over.
Yes.
But you also don't want to put CM Punk over because MJF is probably going to be the next title challenger in line. So unless they switch the title to Adam Cole and have CM Punk go after the title afterwards, I'm not sure how you put Punk over, but you almost need to, especially after this angle. So maybe it's Wardlow turning on MJF, causing Punk to win. I don't know, but I know I'm here for it. Doesn't matter what it is, I'm here for it.
Paul, do you have any thoughts?
I think it's the opposite. I think Wardlow helps MJF win. We get a mini CM Punk Wardlow feud leading into a rematch at MJF's title match at Double or Nothing, and that's where Wardlow turns on MJF, is at Double or Nothing, and then Punk, I don't know what he does. Maybe Punk ends up turning heel as well, like at some point. But I think up until last night, I thought Punk was going to win, and now I think MJF's going to win, even though the angle was conditioned to make people think, oh, Punk got beat up, he's going to win on Saturday. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think MJF, because like Oliver said, I think he's the next logical challenger. I've always said all along, MJF is going to be the guy to beat Hangman. And yeah.
All right. As an aside, are we all getting together in Vegas for Double or Nothing? Is that happening? What's going on with that? Is everyone going to be in Vegas?
I'll be there.
Oliver?
For me, it depends on what AEW decides to do. Whether they bring us in, whether they bring all of us in, or just 2 of the 3. It depends. But if I can help it, I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
I literally just booked my flights before we recorded.
So for the last Double or Nothing, Oliver and I and Carla had a nice photo from waiting in line to get into that building, and we were kind of hanging out and spending, because obviously all of us, we sort of see each other online every once and again, but in person it's kind of like a big deal. So hopefully we will get to do that again. All right, so let's talk about the other match. We'll come back to Jericho Kingston. Paul mentioned Moxley and Danielson, and to me, that is the next biggest match. But John and I were talking about this, which is Bryan Danielson is so beloved, even doing a great job as a heel, that it's almost like this match comes off as babyface versus babyface. And I think it has stunted the heat a little bit because the crowd is not exactly sure who they want to cheer for. Do you, Oliver, do you sense any of that? Because to me, when it comes to the in-ring, I can't wait for this, but I do sense that it's like there's a little bit of like, do we really want to boo Bryan Danielson? We get it, like we're in on it. We enjoy the work, but I kind of like Bryan Danielson still. I'm sensing that from the crowd and from the TV audience.
Well, first of all, when I said what I said earlier was that if the other 2 matches were the only matches on the card, I'd say it's a 10 out of 10, but I'm looking forward to this match tremendously as well. I want to say that the match itself is probably pretty smart because nobody's going to boo Jon Moxley.
Yeah.
After what happened, after his stint in wellness school, so to speak. And people don't want to boo Bryan Danielson, as you said, but he's been presented as a kick-ass heel so far. But I think if they have the brutal match that I expect them to have, I think it's going to be beneficial to both guys. And I personally would love to see Danielson, Mox, and Eddie riding a couple of the young guys like Daniel Garcia, maybe even Hook, Dante Martin, and just, iron sharpens iron. Mm-hmm. Just making them into the next generation's version of themselves. That's what I'm here for. And I think you got to do the match. You got to have them be really brutal to each other in order to appreciate each other, in order to stand side by side. That's my fantasy booking. What do I know?
Paul, are you sensing the same thing that I'm sensing with the reactions?
Well, I think I honestly, as much as I enjoyed the match, and it was just an excellent match to open the show on last night, that was a horrible idea for building Danielson Moxley, because I mean, you had this 15-minute match where the first 80% of it was babyface versus babyface, and then Danielson turned heel at the end, at the very end, and kicked his effing head in, and then reminded everybody that he's a heel, and then he did the angle with Moxley, and I mean, he did his job perfectly, but everything leading up to that was designed to get you to cheer him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that unless this ends with Danielson and Moxley teaming, I'm going to be disappointed, because I'm so excited about the prospect of this super stable of violent shooters, and I love the idea of Kingston being in there, and I think Garcia is a natural, and I don't even know if you need any more than that. You could literally just have the four of them be like the Kingdom in ROH when they brought in Adam Page, as like the guy they were building up to be the next guy, and they just teach him to be this silent assassin killer. I can't even think of anybody else in AEW that really fits that mold. Maybe a Lee Moriarty, but I don't think he has the charisma that Daniel Garcia has.
Are we sensing 30-minute draw here to get to that desired result?
No.
Who do you think wins?
Mox.
I got to agree. Mox.
Okay.
For me personally.
All right.
The reason why I don't think it's going to go to a draw is because the card is so stacked. Unless it goes 5 or 6 hours.
You got the Jade Cargill match, though, that could be 30-second squash.
It should be.
Take the title off of Jade, give it to Ty.
Oh, Ty with the 30-second squash.
Nah.
So Daza had an idea for this. He said that MJF wins, Punk goes after the title to get it first, so that MJF has to give him the rematch. There you go.
That.
Good.
Smart. That's Daza for you.
Good wrestling mind there, Daza. All right, so I think, gosh, I mean, I think both guys can win. I know that there's a sympathy to Moxley right now, but he's obviously not in the title picture, so they're not running or they're not using that as a way to get him over or whatever. He's already over. I could see both guys winning, which is why the draw thing kind of was in my head, because if we do, there was a lot of people who desperately were like, this is like one of the greatest ideas ever, having them together and being this group. And I'm trying to think of what's the way, like, is it about Mox getting Danielson's respect? Is it about Danielson getting Mox's respect? Like, how do we get to that point to where both guys are like, okay, I'm in. Whatever. I'm just intrigued at the finish. So like a lot of matches on this show, I'm very intrigued in how they get there.
Well, if you go by the promos, I guess Danielson has to get Mox's respect, because Mox said first we got to bleed together, then we can stand together.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking he's going to have to be more brutal than Mox.
And I think Moxley or Danielson has to show Moxley that he's violent. That's what Moxley wants to see. He wants to see violence. So.
Blood. I don't know. So there's going to be a lot of blood on this show. All right. So let's talk about Kingston and Jericho. It is, I don't know. Jericho's got in great shape. Kingston wasn't on the show last night. I'm assuming he's going to be on Friday to kind of do the final thing. There was the segment with Jericho and Santana and Ortiz where he's like, are we good? And I've been in that position before. If you have to ask, are we good? It's usually not good. I don't expect it to be good. But what is your Oliver? Why is this on your list of top 2 matches here?
Well, first of all, I love the promo they did together last week. It felt real from Eddie's side. It felt like one of the best Jericho promos Jericho's ever done. as a sports entertainer. It feels like a clash between two worlds. The most legit guy in AEW, the most real person, versus arguably the fakest person in AEW. And I don't mean that facetiously. I'm just saying that Jericho is a typical sports entertainer. Kingston is a wrestler's wrestler.
Yeah.
And to me personally, I love the idea of having Jericho be the guy that Eddie Kingston finally climbs over to get to that top echelon that's eluded him so far.
And we've been waiting for that, right? We've been
Exactly.
waiting for Kingston to beat whoever it is to anoint him in that way.
However, I want Jericho to win this match.
Mm-hmm.
I want this to be a 2 or 3 program series, match series, because it's got to mean something for Eddie, and he's going to have to claw his way back to that chance and then finally win the big one. Jericho needs to be validated right now because, number one, he's the bigger star, arguably in AEW history compared to Kingston. And number two, if this promo set up an Eddie Kingston win, then Jericho shouldn't have said the last line he said.
Right.
It should have been Eddie Kingston saying, "Bring the best Chris Jericho ever, or I'm going to eat you alive." You know, because Jericho was the one who left with the heat. So he really needs to beat Kingston, and I hate to say that because I'm 100% team Eddie Kingston. He's like the biggest breakout star that AEW has had that I did not see coming.
Paul sure as hell didn't see it coming.
No. I mean, and he won me over like within like 2 months, and maybe quicker than that. I agree with Oliver that, you know, initially I thought Eddie had to win this, but I think it's got to be, I think he's got to lose and then get back. And I have what I think is the perfect plan. And that is that Eddie Kingston and Chris Jericho get to the finals of the Owen at Double or Nothing. And that's where Eddie Kingston gets his big win over Jericho. Because Jericho and the Owen, you know, being trained by the Hearts, it's natural. And Eddie Kingston getting the win on, you know, it's basically AEW's WrestleMania. I think it's perfect. And then, you know, he's the first ever Owen. You can never take that away from him. For me, in some ways, that's bigger than winning, you know, a title, an actual title, like having that cup. The Owen specifically, you know, because Owen was a wrestler's wrestler and a guy that never got his due. So, yeah, I'm if that doesn't happen, I'm going to be very disappointed.
I was just looking at an old 88 Wrestling Observer, and Dave is writing about Owen James, young rookie Owen James.
Wow.
All right, so let's talk about the 2 title matches here. So Hangman Page, Adam Cole, they put over Cole and Red Dragon on TV last night as, you know, taking advantage of Page. And you know, something that Oliver said about is also something that I've mentioned is, you know, Page seemingly always getting his head handed to him in these segments. I think they had to do it on this one because Cole, I don't know if it's the losing to Orange Cassidy thing, but he came in hot and did not stay hot. And even in winning all of those matches as well. So it wasn't only the Orange Cassidy thing. I don't know if it's getting the NXT group together that to the AEW fan base, they kind of rolled their eyes. I don't know if that's the case either, but I do think that he needed something in order to make people interested in this match. But I don't think Cole is winning. Like I think, you know, they have these long drawn out title ideas, and now the game has changed. I'm sure when Tony Khan booked the idea of Adam Page winning the title, his roster looked a lot different. But I still think that I don't think they're going to give up on Page here. I don't know what you do with Cole after if Kenny Omega is not ready. It doesn't sound like he's going to be ready for a couple months because that's sort of the natural way to go. But title match, I think it's going to be a really good match. I think it's going to have a hard time keeping the crowd because that's the end of a long show that is probably have seen everything. Oliver, any thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think it's the first match between the two, but they're gonna have storylines intertwined for years to come. Mm-hmm. I personally believe that the big money is number 1 in the Kenny Omega rematch, number 2 in Hangman and Kenny teaming up again. So Hangman, Kenny, and the Bucks against Red Dragon, Adam Cole, and somebody else. That's the one that I'm kind of thinking they're working towards. As far as this match goes, I agree with you. It's going to be great in the ring. I have no doubt they're going to tear the house down. But coming in last and with not that much anticipation is probably going to hurt the crowd reactions for the match. But I do think it's going to be a really good match. And I think afterwards we're going to go like, whoa, this was much better than we had anticipated. But, you know, not every match can be the most anticipated match on the show. Got to be honest.
Yeah. Kind of feels like the Jericho Hangman match at the original Double or Nothing. That was the one, right? That had to follow the Bucks and Lucha Brothers. You know, so where you could look back on it, and when you watch it on isolated, it was a great match. But at the time watching it, it was like this, you know, I'm just not feeling this because I just watched, you know, I watched Cody Dustin, I watched the Bucks and the Lucha Brothers, and then I watched these two. So yeah, I agree. I do think it's going to be a great match though, because Cole always delivers in a big match, and they're going to get time. And Page, I mean, Page is, you know, he's averaging 4.83 stars in this title reign. Like, I mean, it's just insane, you know. And some, like, he wrestled Lance Archer, you know, like, it's not all his opponents, you know, it's him too. And Cole is always delivers in the big matches as well. So yeah, I do. This is the one though where, like, if you're doing like an NFL thing where you assign points to, you know, you're most confident about this result and you're least confident in this, I give, you know, this is the most confident I am about any of these matches, and I think it's 100% Cole's losing, Page is winning.
You were getting on me the other day for screwing up the Adam Cole
Adam
Page thing, and you just did it.
I know, and I do it on the Dynamite show all the time. And Daniels and Danielson last night. Oh my god.
Yeah, that was a hard one.
Page and Cage and
yeah.
Trust
Christian
me,
Cage.
It's difficult on commentary as well sometimes.
I can imagine.
Christian Cage and Ethan Page are wrestling on Rampage, aren't they? Yeah.
In Age of the Cage.
All right. The other singles title match, the world title match here. Britt Baker, Thunder Rosa. They had the match on Dynamite. That was the lights out match with the blood, and was very critically acclaimed, up really high on a lot of best match lists. This time, though, they're not going to have some of the smoke and mirrors that they did. It's going to be a straight match. Last night's match was a rough watch, and it wasn't only like, I wanted to think it was only like sort of Hayter and Mercedes, but I thought Britt's offense was really, really bad. She was missing a lot of stuff, and, you know, poor Mercedes was having to sell for things that like look like they completely missed. I you know, again, I have high hopes for this match because I think they'll figure it out, and they know that it is time to, you know, to put on a great performance. But on a show, it's so weird because you have so many high level matches. It's really hard to stand out on a show like this, and I just really look at there's going to be a high level of difficulty for them. So my hope is that they have something that's going to be different that will allow them to stand out in a positive way. But Oliver, do you have high hopes for this one?
You know, they have a lot to live up to from that lights out match they did. I think it's smart that it doesn't have a big stipulation. That's a straight wrestling match, because you got to go in a different direction. The one thing that I find kind of concerning is that Britt and Thunder Rosa don't seem to have all that great chemistry together. No. And as you said, the match on Dynamite, I'm not sure if they were just careful not to injure each other before the pay-per-view, or if they're not on the same page. It was weird. It felt weird. And I hope that they're going to be in a position on Saturday that, number one, the crowd isn't completely dead when they have their match. And number two, that they can take it back to what they did on Dynamite several months ago. Maybe just without the plunder, but with actual wrestling action.
Paul.
The thing that really concerned me about this was the tag team match on Wednesday, last night. And this happened in the main event as well. They were building to spots where the two were finally going to square off. So it's Baker and Rosa, and they did the same thing in the main event with Cole and Page. And when they finally did square off, the reaction from the crowd was almost nothing. And you were expecting that huge pop, you know, like, oh, we're finally going to see these two get their hands on each other. And it was like nothing. Now, I don't know if that was because of the way the match was going and people just wanted it to end. I think that was part of it. I think that part of it was they were so worked up from everything else they'd seen, from Danielson and we're going to have that again tonight or on Sunday. So I do think they're in a really tough spot, and I would have preferred to see this match as the main event of a Dynamite as opposed to the 5th match on a pay-per-view. That's just me.
And that's really hard with the depth of these cards. Like they only have pay-per-views, every few months, and that means that everything that they're building up to one show, and so you have like these really, really great cards, and somebody's probably going to get the short shrift. Though, if this is sort of real competition, it's kind of like you should be inspired to have to follow what you just saw, but at the same time, I can also see it being a lot of pressure. Like, oh my gosh, like how do I follow that? And knowing that the crowd's going to be down, and how do you get them up? It's not like, it's old school wrestling, and you just like throw on a headlock until the crowd does what you want. You can't do that on a 4-hour pay-per-view. All right, let's just focus on 2 more matches here. Those 2 matches, one of them, the tag team title match, Jurassic Express, Red Dragon, and the Young Bucks. My main concern, it's not really a concern, it's not really a worry, but it's just very apparent. The focus of this match is Red Dragon and the Young Bucks. That's going to be a storyline that this looks to be the beginning stages that they're going to tell. The Jurassic Express, very, very much like we were talking about the world title matches, that they are just overshadowed as well. And they are the champions. I don't know what to really expect here. I do know that we've been talking about, the rise of the Jungle Boy seemingly forever now. So I would love to see him be a standout performer in this match. And some of the stuff that they do should benefit to be for his benefit. But I don't know. Like I kind of was, I was a little bored last night watching another tag team multi-man battle royal. And, I don't know why we had to have 2 back-to-back weeks, but I am not feeling this match as much as I thought I would. I don't know what you guys think, Oliver.
It's probably going to be angle heavy. As you said, it's going to be about the Bucks and Red Dragon. I want to say if I had to pick one match on the card that was going to be my lock, it would be Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus retaining here. There's some shenanigans between the Young Bucks and Red Dragon that kind of backfire, and that might lead to something in the main event of the show where the Bucks kind of, come out and help the Hangman or something. I think it's going to be more storyline heavy, more angle heavy than a match where the result is in doubt.
What do you think, Paul?
So I'm calling for a title change here, just because when I'm looking at everything else on the card, I see the champions retaining, and I think we should have at least one title change. And so I think it's probably gonna be Red Dragon, and I could possibly see the Young Bucks taking out, Jungle Boy and or Luchasaurus, and then Red Dragon stealing the pin, which is kind of, like a WWE trope, and then that could lead into what Oliver's talking about in the main event, where, because they did tease some stuff where, the Bucks and Paige may be together. There was the one spot where, the Red Dragon was beating on on Hangman, and the Bucks did not join in. They just stood there and watched. So they didn't save him, but they also didn't participate in the beatdown. So, there's some stuff going on there. And I just think that it's more interesting to have Red Dragon as the champions going forward, because then the Bucks can be the challengers. You still have Jurassic Express. You got Santana Ortiz, having a heel tag team. And I mean, you could easily do the Bucks as well, but I just, Red Dragon, now it's now or never with them. Bobby Fish isn't getting any younger. And if you're going to put the tag team titles on them, it's probably better to do it right now.
Okay, so last match I want to talk about, Keith Lee versus Orange Cassidy versus Powerhouse Hobbs versus Ricky Starks versus Wardlow and either Christian Cage or Ethan Page in the face of the Revolution ladder match for a future AEW TNT championship. Now, MJF last night said that Wardlow could keep his TNT title if he does win this match and then win the TNT title. So there's something there. Wardlow is being built up like a monster. He's not getting the Goldberg chance necessarily, but there's a little bit of Dave Bautista evolution going on. There's a little bit of Goldberg going on. He seems like one of those guys who you're supposed to be paying attention to, who doesn't get a tremendous focus. Obviously, being a part of MJF is a big act for him. But there are other folks, Keith Lee, very much heralded debut. Powerhouse Hobbs, I think people want to see more of him. Same with Ricky Starks. And then Christian Cage, more probably to kind of keep that match together, help them put it together. So, Oliver, A, who do you want to win? And B, what do you sort of expect out of this?
A would be Ricky Starks, because I would love to see him and Sammy tussle for a while. And the thing I like about this match is because there are so many heavy guys in the match, I think we're going to get a couple of spots that you usually wouldn't get with ladders, where they're going to try to kill each other with the ladders on the ground, as opposed to killing each other from the ladders way up top. The one problem I have right now is it's going to be really hard to even keep pace with the ladder match that Sammy had with Cody just a couple of weeks ago. So
yes,
they're going to have to pull out all the stops to make this special. Otherwise, it's going to fizzle out.
Do you sense that if Wardlow doesn't win this match, Spears is part of the reason?
Please never split those two up. Sean Spears has been so great over the past couple of months as the flunky. I never want this to end. Even though I want it to end, I don't want it to end.
All right, Paul, thoughts?
So I'm good. So before last night, I thought it was going to be Wardlow, but then as soon as MJF said, "Oh, you can keep the title if you win," now I think it might not be Wardlow.
Yeah.
So I'll say Keith Lee.
I think that's who I'm.
Yeah, because I really want to see him and Sammy Guevara. Like him throwing around Sammy Guevara for 15 minutes. That's gonna be fun. And then what do you expect out of the match? I think I think it's going to be there was one of these matches that I think Cody and Ricky Starks were both in. Well, it's the last Face of the Revolution ladder match, the one that Ethan Page was the wild card, and that one, we're going to see a lot of guys, probably Ricky Starks and Orange Cassidy, being taking these heavy bumps, Orange Cassidy doing his his probably a dive off the top of the ladder and all this stuff, and just some Haas stuff, I'm really looking forward to. And then Christian there to kind of keep it all together. And I expect this to be a sleeper, I know you guys don't like stars, but like a 4-star plus match, and hopefully it opens the show, and it should be really good.
All right, the matches we didn't really talk about on the buy-in show: Hook against QT, Chris Statlander against Layla Hirsch. And then Jade and Ty Conti. We kind of talked about it a little bit. The match that I have no idea why it's on this card is Andrade, Isaiah Cassidy, Matt Hardy versus Darby Allin, Sammy Guevara, and Sting. And we hit all the other matches. So the reason why I didn't want to get through all that, because I did want to save a few minutes here for this UFC 272 main event between Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal. Now, Paul, you and Ryan talked about sort of the back storyline of why this match matters, why it's a big deal, why people are interested in the clinch, which went up Tuesday. Can you give us a condensed version of that, and then we'll just talk about the match?
Yeah, I mean, and if you want to hear, Ryan broke it down really well on In the Clinch. You can go back and listen to that on the free feed. But so essentially, Colby and Jorge Masvidal were teammates at American Top Team. And they were training partners because Colby was going to help Jorge with his wrestling, and Jorge was going to help Colby with his striking. And, to the point where Jorge even cornered him for his interim title match against, I think it was Kamaru Usman, a couple of years ago. And then, then Colby started doing this gimmick of, being the contrarian, the Trump lover, all this stuff. And Dan Lambert helped him out a lot with that, tying it into AEW. And then basically Colby just started living his gimmick and he became impossible to deal with, and they had a falling out. And actually at one point they were both kicked out of American Top Team, and then they brought Jorge back, and now Colby's with with other guys, and they just, now this worked hatred has become like real hatred, because Colby's calling Jorge fake, and Jorge is a street fighter, and Colby will call him a street thug, and he will use that word exactly how you want it. You think it shouldn't be used, that's what he means. And I think if this was an actual street fight, Jorge would kill him. But I think in an MMA match, Colby's probably got a few more tools in the toolbox.
And so that's what I was wondering, because now, the main thread to both of these guys is so Colby's last 3 fights, 1 and 2, beat Tyron Woodley and lost the other 2 fights to Kamaru Usman. And Jorge Masvidal's last 2 fights are also losses to Kamaru Usman. I know one was sort of a last minute kind of thing, but this is sort of like the fight is more about this rivalry than it is about necessarily who's going to get the next shot at Usman, because they've already had their shots. But Masvidal is such a I guess he's kind of compelling, but he's very charismatic. I thought during the pandemic, he was one of the guys who made himself much bigger just by doing media. I saw him on a couple of different ESPN things. Now he also has interesting politics that probably detract from what people, if they enjoy him or not. Colby, on the other hand, you said the thing about how he started to sort of buy into his gimmick. One of my friends is Instagram friends with his sister. And she said, she asked me about it. She's like, what's the deal with this guy? And so I kind of told her, and she's like, yeah, because like normal Instagram, and then at a point it was all pro-Trump stuff. And so like the family is like bought into this thing as well. So I don't know, just I sort of feel the same way as you do. I think this is probably Colby's fight to lose. And it would be I think it would make a lot of people unhappy, but maybe it makes a lot of people happy. Oliver, how closely are you following this, if at all?
Well, I've known both guys for many, many years. I've spent time at American Top Team watching them train with each other. I've been on the receiving end of a couple of calls where people complained about each other. There's a lot of reality in what's being presented right now, and I don't expect them to make up after the fight. No. I'm always going to have love for Jorge Masvidal because he starched Darren Till, who's one of the people I dislike the most in the entire sport.
That's awesome.
But I think he's getting ridden by Colby for 5 rounds. Yeah. And I don't see how he wins this. So I think Colby's got this in the bag. The problem is that it isn't really for a title shot, but the loser is probably out of title contention for good. So I kind of hope that Jorge manages to starch Colby, but I'm not confident in that one. So I think I'm going with Colby.
I'm very interested in the crowd reaction to both guys too. Like, how both guys are sort of welcomed by the crowd, and then what happens when the fight starts turning. I'm kind of interested. I mean, I hope things are going to be civil, but all right. So Paul and I will be back this weekend because Paul and Ryan are doing the In the Clinch UFC recap, which we are putting exclusively on the Patreon, and I'm going to join them. This is a make good because I missed the last one, but so we'll be on together on the Patreon if you want to hear us break that down. And Oliver, what's going on with you, man? What where can we find you? And how do we see and hear from more Oliver?
Well, technically, you would have to move to Germany so you can watch Warner TV wrestling in Germany. I'm mostly on Dynamite or Rampage, usually on Rampage more than on Dynamite. And other than that, I'm still waiting for the next Triller pay-per-view.
There you go.
Still haven't heard a word about being on commentary there again. And I'm going to be doing the next TNA pay-per-view for Fight as well.
Oh, nice.
So, next Impact pay-per-view. Other than that, I'll just be out and about, and hopefully I'm going to catch you at Double or Nothing.
Oh, that'd be so great. It'll be so great to see both of you again. I know that Paul's mentioned this privately, but just the the idea that we've all just kind of, I mean, Paul more so than the rest of us, but just not being able to travel at
Well,
all.
Oliver more than me.
Oh,
even
really?
Being stuck in
3
Germany,
years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, I used to go to Vegas like every 4 or 5 weeks for 20 years.
Yeah.
Since my childhood, I haven't not been in Vegas for such a long time as right now.
Wow.
I was when I called today to book my hotels, I was mad because all my comps were lost because I haven't been there in 2 years, and they're like, "Well, you haven't been here in a long time." I'm like, "I couldn't."
Yeah. Yeah.
We had a pandemic.
Yeah, but they were nice. I got 2 free nights at the Venetian, so I'm happy.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. That works.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks to you both for doing this. Really appreciate it. Oliver, we've been doing this now for a few pay-per-views, and hopefully we can continue to do this down the line as well. So thanks to Oliver, thanks to Paul, and also to Andrew, who popped in at the beginning of the show. He was looking quite dapper himself. But yeah, so I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.